Hey Dudley, how was your April Fool's Day? Mine wasn't great. Well, let's see if we can finally get to that Crescent Sanatorium No. No! Come on, not again! No! No! Come on! Dudley, we've been summoned once more. I am the Reverend Victor S. Johnson. Let's go into the Keith Linder accusations against Zak Bagans. Damn it. Okay, before we begin, I have to make this disclaimer, and I want it to be very understood. I don't actually like making content about Zak Bagans. It's my stuff that's been viewed the most. It is clickbait, and it works, and I'm sorry, but it is. My opinion on Zak was in earnest. I don't believe he's a fraud. The allegations video, that was a view grab. Thank you for the views and all the subscriptions. Yay, 350. I love every single one of you, even the ones that insult my shorts. But I can do it. As long as I can make the content I want to make, which is the stuff that no one watches yet, I'm okay with that. By the way, I'm going to take this time to explain my content since there's a little bit of confusion. I'm going to actually cite this controversy here. I am not a paranormal investigator. I am a ghost hunter. But more so, I'm an adventurer and I'm a tour guide. If you've ever read Weird New Jersey, Weird Pennsylvania, or any of the weird books, that's me. I go to places where something weird happened once upon a time, it was documented, I check it out for myself, and I relay that stuff back to you. I'm never going to get my flying brick. That's okay. I'm not here to. I'm here to help you catch your flying brick. I go to these places, and it's in my best interest. It's my personal hope that when you see these videos, you want to go to these places yourself. You want to go to the Eisenhower Bridge. You want to go to Dudleytown. Dudleytown is coming out this week, by the way, knock on wood. You want to go there and you want to investigate. You want to do an actual paranormal investigation. You want to set up all your equipment and you get something and you relay it back. And then it's my hope that your resulting opinion is, hey Rev, thanks for sending me here. Thanks for giving me the inspiration to come to this place. Or, hey Rev, you're an idiot. It was so easy to get evidence, and here's the evidence. Either way, that's my goal. That's all I want to do. Tell ghost stories and go to weird places. Okay? I do some ghost hunting. It doesn't work sometimes. And I hope my last video at the Claridge Hotel really outlines that. But speaking of not always getting evidence, we've got a doozy of an accusation here today. So much so that I actually did research on it and wrote some stuff down this time, so I won't get yelled at for missing something at the end. And I'm sorry about the Nick Goff thing. I corrected that in the pinned comment. Alright, as many of you know, that was my notebook I keep. I don't actually watch Ghost Adventures, nor did I see the Demon House movie or anything like that. I don't like the format. It doesn't interest me. It's okay if you watch it. I don't want to stop you from watching it. And that doesn't mean I think Zak Bagans is a fraud. I don't think he's a fraud. Here's that video here. There's a new video out from someone who was actually on an episode of Ghost Adventures. He was the guest star in season 13, episode 6, Mr. Keith Linder, and I'm gonna link to his channel below. Keith had a bit of a poltergeist problem in his episode Demons in Seattle, and that's where we're gonna begin. Not only did I watch Keith's opinion on Zak Bagans, but I spent extra time checking out the episode as well as looking up supplemental content on the entire history of the haunting, and I got some really good stuff here. Okay, but first we're going to start with season 13, episode 6 of Ghost Adventures, Demons in Seattle. Are you ready, Dudley? This one's going to be a longer one. So Zak's investigative team are himself, Aaron, Billy, and Jay. Dave Schrader is going to come along and join them on the investigation. Dave Schrader will play an integral part in this episode. A lot has been made by Keith about the editing, and we're going to see that by the end when I give my critique on it. It starts with Dave explaining a news clip on ABC4 in Seattle, where Keith is interviewed by reporter Alyssa Jaffe about the goings-on in his home, including Bibles being lit on fire, and by that I mean spontaneously combusting into fire. And while he's giving the interview, there is a bang off camera, and almost completely unshook, Keith says, yeah, like that, or something to that effect. He basically says, well, there you go. There's your proof. We cut back to Zak, who says, well, I'm 50-50 on this whole thing, because all the evidence he sent to us was after the fact. Well, Zak says everything that happened in the house happened off camera, but Keith filmed the aftermath every single time. Early on, Dave Schrader is on Keith's side. There were a total of 3 Bibles that burnt up in the home. There was also a burned cross in one of the Bibles, but it was burned at the edges and not out from the middle. This is brought up later. Candles and candle holders were thrown at the wall. This is actually an event that Keith managed to film, although it is a bit suspect in my own opinion. Keith never pans up to see what's down the hallway. This is pointed out later by Zak and crew. Also, Keith just happened to be filming, and I know that's going to be sheepish later, but it's something I have to point out. Firemen were called after a case of a spontaneous fire, which they talk about in the episode. Tina Lavelle is the girlfriend of Keith Linder at the time, in 2014. She often complains of the house smelling like burned sage. Zak says these are huge claims, and it's very clear to me that the opener was filmed after the fact, and we'll see why later. Meaning, they didn't meet first and talk about this underneath a bridge and then go to the house. They did the investigation, and then they filmed this little vignette. Tina is interviewed by Zak personally. She talks about plants flying across the room, cabinets being left open and then slamming themselves shut. Tina makes a statement to the degree of she and Keith sought out a priest for a blessing from multiple churches, and after being referred several different times, was eventually sent to a psych ward. This will come into play later. Third-party paranormal investigator Jennifer Madsen gives an interview. Jennifer Madsen is a self-proclaimed Native American-based paranormal investigator, and as such, she tried to do a Native American cleansing. At this point, Jennifer says that her sage ignited at random. Tina says they've had multiple blessings on the house, but, quote, it's always here. Around this time, in Keith's office, the numbers 666 are drawn on the walls, and sentences like, deliver us from evil. As well, there are strange symbols on the ceiling. Now, Zak mentions that 666 would be demonology. They contact a representative of the Duwanish Native Nation over the phone, and she tells a little bit of a story about the Duwanish people. This is Cecile Hansen. Zak does make an apt point in this area where he says, wait, so, well, and I'm paraphrasing, so we have demonology mixed with Native American burials, which is a very good point, and again, I'll explain later. Zak questions why the couple would stay in the house for this 2-year period. They had moved in 2012, and it was now 2014 at the time. They have a roundtable segment, which Keith points out later, and they once again bring up demonic symbols mixing with Native American symbols for man. Man and demon are not the same thing, as is pointed out. It is brought up that maybe someone would do this stuff sleepwalking. Zak says it's spray paint. That's not spray paint, just FYI. That looks like charcoal used as chalk, in my opinion. They interview the reporter, Alyssa Jaffe. I would find out later that Ghost Adventures got in contact with Keith through Alyssa and Tina. Ghost Adventures made the first contact. That's according to Keith. Keith is given the benefit of the doubt prior to the investigation. October 1st is when Keith films the candle being thrown in the room off to the side. During this roundtable segment, they contact Archbishop Ron Finnell over the phone, and a lot is made out of this, a big production. They set up static cams, followed by what has to be the most painful acting I've ever seen on cable. It's not even worth showing a clip. Everyone looks bored. Tina kind of clomps around the house in her boots, as Keith shouts at the entity into thin air, begging it to do something. Commands offer nothing. Questions and asks offer nothing. And then we see a light go out. And then we have our act break. At 11:15 p.m., an IR light on one of the cameras in the kitchen goes out. Zak then makes the claim that Tina has a bad energy to the investigators. It's a weird, awkward meet-cute segment. She then once again complains of burning sage. Once again, this will be of significance. There is no activity after about 3 hours. Tina and Keith are then sent to a hotel for what is known as lockdown behind the scenes while the crew investigates the house. This will come up later. Zak gets out the SLS camera, and that's going to be very important later. And I believe Aaron uses his EMF/temperature gauge At a point, there are 2 knocks on the wall after they ask for them, but I can neither confirm nor deny what the source is. The temperature stays on a baseline from between 69 degrees and 72. At a point, the camera in the office does go out. The battery has drained. Zak makes the claim that there is zero visual evidence. Dave Schrader begins to turn on Keith. Electrical engineer Bill Chappell comes in with a new invention. It's kind of a combination EVP catcher / AI command generator and begins to operate that. I'm bored at this point. At 3:29 a.m., Zak throws a Hail Mary. He brings out the full spectrum light camera, which turns everything purple, and conducts an EVP burst session. The only thing that happens is a bug crawls on his face. Officially, the Ghost Adventures Club rules that there is no evidence. As a show of good faith, Zak's words, a cleansing is done with Santo wood. At the end of the episode, Zak lets us know that Keith sent an additional picture of his jeans having been nailed, mysteriously, to the wall. And that concludes the episode. I actually didn't hate the episode because I want to make one thing clear. Even though this was very boring, this is what a ghost hunt is like. A ghost hunt is actually like fishing, except you have less of a chance of catching a ghost, and you can't drink during it. Well, I know some people who would anyway, but it's cold, it's boring, it's tedious. You start to suffer from shift work disorder, and this is why I'm not a paranormal investigator. But this is actually what it's like. My question is, and I'm once again not a fan of Ghost Adventures, I never watched it outside of today. This is the first time I've completed an episode. Were they using a spirit box at this point? Or no? Please let me know in the comments, because a spirit box or an echo box or anything like that never made an appearance. And in Zak's museum, he does use an echo box in one of the chambers. So ultimately, I would give this a C+, having never watched it, just because it's finally a real investigation, I guess. But then, the claims of there being no evidence is where the problem really begins. Now we come to the next part where we meet the man of the hour, Keith Linder, but before I get to Keith, a fellow YouTuber who goes by Moonlight Coffee Art put out a video on Keith, and I wanted to take every angle into account. So I watched Moonlight's video, which I'll link to here. I have to agree with Moonlight in regards to Keith's video evidence, in that none of it is conclusive. None of Keith's video evidence is conclusive. Zero of it. I want to put that out there before I continue. So let's talk about Keith Linder, and you can find his YouTube page here. For starters, Tina Lavelle is no longer with Keith Linder by this point. According to this website, The Ghost Victim Experiment, it's a WordPress, there's a pretty good chronicling of the Bothell Hell House, or the Demon of Seattle House. They have a pretty good timeline on the WordPress. Now, according to the timeline, and Keith corroborates this, Tina left in 2015. And I do have a section on Tina after I'm done with Keith here. According to Keith, they were hounded on social media, namely Ghost Adventures message boards, especially Tina. They called her the Demon Lady, among other things, and they basically blamed the two for wasting Zak's time. Now, here's the thing about that episode, which I did watch. Tina is framed in a negative light despite giving a full interview. Keith makes a good point in his video. Skeptics say that people who make paranormal claims are often seeking attention. Maybe Keith is doing that, but Tina certainly isn't. Tina doesn't give off a bad energy, as Zak says. I think he needed to try to paint a frame of reference that was anything other than they weren't getting any evidence. Tina is someone who seemed like she didn't want to be there, gave the interview anyway, really did try, and it went awry for everyone. And then after that, she was subject to ridicule, online bullying, and other things, to the point where she's no longer in the picture. I did a cursory search of Tina Lavelle. Can't find much about her, if anything. So this is a person who was not seeking attention. I'm not sure what she would stand to gain. That being said, I think she was unjustly persecuted in all this. According to Keith, they weren't sent a preview copy. They didn't even know when the premiere was coming. They were basically watching at home, and they saw it when everyone else saw it when it premiered. Just about all contact between Keith and the Ghost Adventures crew was broken off after the investigation, through no fault of Keith, who continued to send, quote, evidence. By then, the online attacking and bullying had gotten so bad, according to Keith, and I'm paraphrasing, that he contacted Ghost Adventures to see if anyone could put out some sort of statement to maybe curb the toxicity and bullying, saying please don't do this to them. That never happened. Tina was referred to as the Demon Lady within the community. Keith did not like the editing portrayal, and I want to elaborate on that. He said that the editing of the episode carried a clear bias. I do agree with him, maybe for different reasons than he thinks, but we'll get into that. Keith makes a statement that there was similar activity in the house 4 years prior to him moving in. This is corroborated on the Ghost Victim Experiment site. The lady's name is mentioned in Keith's video as Rhonda Lee Jimenez, and Keith reached out to Rhonda to see what was going on. Rhonda corroborated a lot of his claims according to him. Unfortunately, Rhonda Jimenez got out of life in August 15th, 2016. As the song says, she was dancing with the train. Rest in peace, Rhonda. Keith makes allusions to the accusations from Nick and from Bill, refers to him as a kind of Michael Corleone of the paranormal scape. I'm going to refer to that as the paranormal godfather for ease of use. Keith then goes into the demon house. He makes the claim that this was a similar situation, a similar black family, his illusions, and after watching the demon house, wondering why Zak tore the house down, alluding to the fact that Zak didn't want anyone else on his trail in regards to that movie. He makes a good point with that. Why demolish the house in Indiana without getting some sort of corroboration from someone else on it? He refers to Zak as a ghost hunter and not a paranormal investigator, saying he had paranormal investigating teams, and he mentions them by name, and I'll go over them in a minute. He had paranormal investigation teams over in years that followed, and he says they would stay for 6 days to a week or two. I want to say definitely 6 days. I want to say up to 2 weeks, gaining evidence. According to Keith, his claims were proven true by Nicole Novell, and then later after that, Steve Mara's team, Nick Kyle, and Don Phillips. I'll put out a link to the Steve Mara documentary in the description. These teams claim that it's a localized intelligent haunting, which is Keith's claim. I'm paraphrasing this, but I have down Keith said Zak lies about doing research. That one may be true. Can't corroborate, I can't confirm or deny. This is based on, again, those places I've worked that call him Douche Bagans. Keith makes another complaint here in that he says he was blacklisted within the paranormal community. I don't exactly know what this means. Keith did not have a television show. He had his YouTube channel all this time, before the investigation and after the investigation. Keith makes claims of having PTSD and even residual hauntings from the time he spent living in the house. He also makes claims that medium Patty Hale was attacked. These are audio-only claims. I'll link to them. I find them a bit, and this is just personal, I find them a bit lacking. There's no video, and in that YouTube clip, the message is written, "The ghosts don't like IR cameras." I think that's a cop-out, and I'll go into that at the end. So now, lastly, we have to go to the Ghost Victim Experimentation, which has a pretty good recap of everything going on. I'm going to link to them here. I'm also going to put up their page. But Keith found the house on Craigslist in 2012. He asked Tina to move in with him. They signed a lease. According to Tina, the activity began the day they signed the lease. However, according to this website, there are gaps in the records of activity. It stops and starts for years. It began in 2012, but stopped in 2013. The activity didn't resume until 2014 when, and I have this written down, when Keith fell down the stairs and hurt himself. At this point, the activity began again. Keith was a beta tester for the Xbox 360 Kinect, ironically enough. See, I told you I would get back to that. That's what an SLS camera basically is, if you recall. When he would practice with the Xbox 360 Kinect, his coworkers at Microsoft would tell him, hey, there are shadows on the Kinect that you can't see, but we're picking them up, or something to that effect. That's a paraphrase. They basically saw shadows through his Kinect camera at the home office. It's kind of ironic how that fits in with Zak's whole SLS thing, right? Keith goes on to say that he goes on to emphasize this, and this is on that website, they contacted him. Ghost Adventures Club contacted Keith and Tina through the news reporter. Keith claims it was a 5-hour investigation. That's according to the website. And this reiterates that Tina left in 2015. So that's what we have as the facts. See, I wrote them all down. Now I gotta give you my final thoughts. Okay, so where do I stand in all this? I think it's complicated, and I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. We're gonna examine everyone bit by bit. I'm gonna start with Zak, the aggrieved, so to speak. I don't think in 5 hours Zak got anything visual. I think he was right about that. But I do think there were a few things he could have at least taken a closer look at. For one thing, the two cameras, well, the one camera dying and the IR light dying on the other one, that's been corroborated in subsequent investigations by, I want to say, 3 different teams. Plus there was a 4th team that was there prior to Ghost Adventures. And they all corroborated certain spots where electrical power kind of went out to certain things. Now, Now, that doesn't mean I agree with the whole ghosts don't like the IR cameras theory. That's just kind of stupid, Keith. I'm sorry. I saw here that you'd purchased some security cameras. Where are they? What are you looking at? And with Zak, why I think he didn't follow up with the power dying to those devices. Now, I don't think Zak took the investigation all that seriously, and I'll tell you why. It's that old rule in show business, tough act to follow. Robin Williams used to come on stage at the Comedy Store. He would do an hour in front of guys waiting to go up, and those comedians would have to go home because Robin stole the stage, he stole the audience. The audience isn't going to be in tune with their act. Well, that's kind of what happened here. Think about it. You have an alleged possession with poltergeist activity. You've got 3 Bibles that all spontaneously combusted. You had a poster that caught fire out of nowhere. You had clothing that caught fire while people were wearing it. And you've got writing manifesting on walls, allegedly. You have all these things. By the time the Ghost Adventures Club gets there, they've either got to get any of that on camera, or anything that they actually get on camera is going to look minuscule by comparison. And I think Zak knew that, so he kind of decided to go with plan B. The hell with it, there's nothing here, goodbye. And that was it. That's why I think we're missing stuff from the investigation, and why the investigation was only 5 hours. Because if you can't get any of this phenomena on camera that's been alleged, you're not going to live it down. Because it wasn't just those devices dying, which again was corroborated. In that episode, when one of them asked the entity to knock on the wall, and I heard 2 knocks, they don't come back to that. I could also tell that Zak wasn't trying to debunk it. And the key thing in debunking this is literally written on the walls. Now I'm going to come back to the walls in a second, because I said where I stand with Zak. It was easier to kind of pull out of the investigation and try and save face than it was to not get any of the alleged gigantic phenomena on camera. So there we are with that. Zak cut off his finger to save the hand, so to speak. Let's move on to Keith. I'm going to preface this by saying a lot of this is going to be my own opinion. I don't know Keith. Seems like a nice enough guy. I've never met him. I never met Tina. I never met anyone involved here. Don't know them. I didn't go to Seattle. I didn't look at the house. None of that. From an outsider's perspective, I think Keith is telling the truth somewhat. I think some of these things did happen to him. I think there was energy in the house. That's been corroborated by at least 2 teams. And I'm going to put these links in the video. I think voices can be heard. I think EVPs were obtained from time to time. I even think, and I'll even give this the benefit of the doubt, there might have been the occasional physical manifestation. But I think Keith had all this stuff happen, and I think it's nothing visual. I want to say that. I don't believe any of the visual stuff. Sorry, Keith. I think all this auditory and sensory stuff happened, and maybe it overwhelmed him and Tina both. And then they started to run away with their own imaginations. To the point where I have to come back to this writing on the wall. If Zak is really trying to debunk this case, there's a simple way to do it. I can't believe I'm paraphrasing Joe Nickel again, but can anyone take a sample of the crap on the wall and send it somewhere for analysis to tell me if it's charcoal, spray paint, crap, or sulfur, or something not of this world? Anything. It's right there. Did they ever try to wash it off? Did it come back? Etc, etc. It's just there in this office. You have it right there. And I'm not saying it can't happen. Do you know why? It happened to me. Check this video for more details. But my issue was a different manifestation. When it happened, I didn't think anything of it because it doesn't say 666 on my pant leg. It doesn't have a weird native symbol for man on my pant leg. It just looks like someone dragged it over in soot, but I thought I did it to myself. And by the time I get home, mind you, I've done nothing. It's gone. So I can't send anything anywhere for analysis. His is different. It appeared out of nowhere and it stayed there. Just send it to a lab. That's all you gotta do. One way or the other, you'll get an answer. No one thought to do that in 4 years. So the investigation is a bust. I think Zak played it the right way, but for the wrong reasons. It was only to save himself and not teach anybody anything about skeptical analysis, because I don't think he even believes in skeptical analysis. That's just where I stand with him. My opinion, take it for what it's worth. I'm not making a formal accusation. And while I think stuff has happened to Keith, and I go back to one of my Zak Bagans videos, funny enough, where I say, if you're lying, you don't work this hard to show people evidence that they could scrutinize. What I think happened with Keith was the auditory things happened, the internal senses things happened to both him and Tina. So I think the stuff happened with him and Tina. I think she got overwhelmed with it. She seems kind of like an empath. That may be why she's a little bit quiet, an introverted empath. I think those things happen, and I think it started getting away with him because he would tell people, he says, this happens to me and that happens to me, and no one really believes him. And people just look at him, give him a funny look, and tell him to go about his day. So he's got to start upping the ante. I'm not making a formal accusation, but in my opinion, seeing as the only video evidence we have is after the fact, except for 2 instances where we don't have have full range of motion of the room, and because proper analysis wasn't done on certain things on either side, and because I just don't see the mixture of a very vague Christianity prophecy like the 666 thing. I've said this in another video. If writing 666 on something opened a portal to hell, I'd like to introduce you to my middle school bleachers, okay? I don't think mixing Christian lore with Native American spiritual lore really makes that much sense. I have to paraphrase Joe Nickell again because I think it sums up Keith. He once said about Ed Warren, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't think Ed has ever been in a house that wasn't haunted. He hears a nail pop or a floorboard creak and suddenly we have demons. And honestly, I think that's what it is with Keith. That doesn't mean he's a bad guy. It doesn't mean he's not going through stuff. I just think it's something he can't prove and he's trying anyway. And that's where I'm gonna leave it. I hope that made sense, traveler, because it took me a while to come up with, but let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you again for the 350 subscriptions. I am the Reverend Victor S. Johnson. I've been places you've only read about. This is my partner Dudley. Safe travels, traveler.